For the viewer of the tape, this is Dr. Tom Bannon again from the Kane University and the Battleship New Jersey Oral History Project. Today I'm talking with Mr. Thomas Cathers, who served aboard the Battleship New Jersey during his tour in Vietnam. And this tape and ultimate DVD will be number 2 out of 2 tapes, DVDs of this interview. Today is February 20th, the year 2009. Tom, let's continue the conversation. You mentioned something very interesting while we took a break during lunch about the amount of gunpowder on the deck after fire missions. Could you please talk about that a little bit?
The gunpowder was really a dangerous situation. After a major firing mission, the smoking lamp was out throughout the entire ship. There was a serious foundation why they did that. On the signal bridge and the decks involved around the various, whichever, if it was a 5-inch 38 or if it was a 16-inch gun, there was always some type of gunpowder residue. And the evening that we shot 1,500 rounds of 5-inch 38s and about 100 some odd rounds of 16-inch shells, the next morning when everything was finished, the smoking lamp was out for several hours. On the signal bridge itself, we went around the bridge and we would use a broom and sweep up the gunpowder and pick it up with a shovel and fill up 55-gallon drums full of gunpowder. This was on the signal bridge. That's a signal bridge, which was distance from the muzzle. Throughout the rest of the main deck, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, considerable amount of gunpowder was all over the place. The gunpowder pieces, a piece of gunpowder was about 4 inches long, quarter-inch square. The 4-inch long by a quarter-inch square was really flammable. If anybody was smoking or lit a cigarette around there in one of those 55-gallon drums that had all of that gunpowder on it, were to explode, it could cause some serious problems. What we did, we would take the gunpowder, we would put it into the containers and then throw it overboard. There was no reason to keep it on the ship. There was nothing that they would be able to do with it. So it would take a couple hours to clean the ship up to ensure that there would be no flammable devices or flammable material around. And then after that was over with and the smoking lamp would be on.
Now you mentioned once you were caught on deck once or twice. Excuse me, once I think when a 16-inch gun went off, then with a 5-inch gun. Could you explain to the viewers what it was like, especially with the concussion impact on your body, what that was like, and what they also ordered you to do if you were caught on deck, how you were ordered to stand and conduct yourself while the gun is firing?
It happened once or twice when I was caught between a gunfire with 16-inch going from Halsey's Bridge into the signal bridge. And it would be a sound like an antique 1920s car, a ooga, a ooga, a ooga. It would do that 3 times. And then on the third ooga, the 16-inch gun would detonate. I was caught on deck one time with a 16-inch gun. And I do not remember exactly where I was between the signal bridge and Halsey's. However, I heard the ooga. I knew I was in trouble. I heard it again. I took off and I was aiming for the signal bridge. I heard the ooga. And then I heard the ooga again. I knew I better stop because this third ooga, it only goes ooh, and that's it. Then the gun explodes. 660 pounds of gunpowder is pushing out a 2,000-pound round, and this is what we do. You put a finger here, open the mouth, bend the knees, and prepare for a concussion because it shakes the body. And the reason why the finger is put on the ear is to prevent the eardrum from blowing out. The reason why the mouth must be opened is because the amount of pressure inside of the lungs, it's like being held by a gigantic, very rapid, and then let loose bear hug. Boom! Like that. The entire body becomes encapsulated with this amount of pressure. And it will blow the air out. It can cause a statutory tube problems. Therefore, let the air be pushed out of your lungs, through your mouth, and then come back in again.
And you're actually trained to do this?
Well, we were told how to do it. We were taught how to do this, yes.
Now, what happened with the 5-inch gun when you were caught on deck?
Oh, that was a real surprise because there's no warning with a 5-inch gun. The 5-inch gun on the starboard side, on the port side, the 5-inch gun on the port side was at the 90-degree angle toward the ocean, toward the main deck. And then suddenly, as I was coming up the ladder right underneath the 5-inch gun, I saw the barrel come up and the turret, the mount, move. I knew I was in trouble there, but I didn't expect it to fire. So finally, it was about a 45-degree angle, and then it lifted up. I don't know how many degrees the barrel was up, and I just cleared the ladder, and I saw it, and I was running for the signal bridge again, and I did not make it. When that 5-inch went off, that hurt. That hurt more than the 16-inch does. I really thought it was going to blow my eardrums out. So the muzzle was approximately 30 feet away from me, and it opened fire. Now, actually, 30 feet was too much, probably somewhere in the area 15 to 20 feet away, and it just opened fire with both rounds. It blew myself down, and I was able to regain myself. But that one I never forgot for the rest of my life. I watched out for that stuff. And when I mean for the rest of my life, I never forgot. I can tell you about that now. I can tell you about that 30 years from now.
You can still feel the concussion on
I
your
can
body.
feel it. It hurts. And I can understand why men and women who are in the field around artillery, I can understand why they get what's called shell shock.
Or they also get what's called cannon cocker's ears,
Yes.
where you actually go deaf, because in the old days you didn't wear any ear protection. And my major in Vietnam, Major Charlie McDonald, had been an artilleryman. He could not hear a thing. He had to fake all his hearing tests to stay in the Marine Corps.
I
He
believe
was
that.
deaf. He was deaf from the concussion and all the pressure on the ears. Now, you also mentioned that you were down in, was it the gunpowder room or some of that, handling gunpowder bags? What happened to your hands? There was almost an accident.
That was, as I was reviewing my letters, I saw this and I said, my gosh, I forgot that even happened. These letters were 40 years old. It had been 40 years since I read the letters. And there was one area where I was working the 16-inch magazine, and 400 pounds of gunpowder came rolling over to me and pinned myself up against the wall. I had, as I read the letters, it's jogging my memory. It's all in my records. It's all in my letters, so I'm not making this up. I pinned myself against the wall, and I thought I had some broken ribs after it got me against the wall, but I was okay. I'm a pretty tough guy.
There were the bags, it must have been 3 or 4 number of bags of gunpowder rolling against you. How did they roll against you, and how did they get loose? What happened?
What happens is gunpowder, if I'm not mistaken, it's 3 bags of gunpowder to 1 container. And if I'm not mistaken, it takes 6 bags of gunpowder to shoot 1 round. So there were 3 containers, and inside of the container there were 3 bags of gunpowder. So the bag that had the container that had 3 bags of gunpowder, maybe it was 4. My memory doesn't actually remember that. But it was 400 pounds, 440 pounds, it was 4 bags of gunpowder. They're inside of a container, and the container, so it has a safety factor. It prevents it from having any type of weather damage, the gunpowder having weather damage. But I presume that the barrel just became loose. I was pushing it along like this and fell right into my body. They hurt when you're moving that kind of stuff, and we did not move it just by our hands. We used devices to move it.
Did you ever get hurt in any other way, did you mention?
Oh, yeah. Kind of a dumb thing. But what happened, we have general quarters, and I was up on the signal bridge, and I was on the port side. And my general quarter station was on the port side. So I took a run through about 3 hatches. And on the 3rd hatch, right before I got to the signal bridge, I miscalculated. Not my feet. My feet didn't hit the bottom of the hatch. My knee hit the side of the hatch. So my knee went right into the side of that hatch. I had a full run going into general quarters. So that put me down. And that knee injury still hurts me. Even today, sometimes the cold weather still bothers me.
Which knee was it?
That was my right knee.
And did you have to go to the medical area for that?
I guess I'm just a only tough old guy. I absorb a lot.
Just a quick question. Did you ever use the medical or dental area while you were aboard the ship? And how did you find its operation?
Excellent and excellent to both occasions. The dental area for normal dental processes, because I was always conscious of my teeth. And I am proud to say that when I went into the Navy in 1965, of August 1965, the dental technicians, as they were speaking to us, they said, use Crest toothpaste and do this and use dental floss. To this day, I use Crest toothpaste. And by the way, I'm one of those Navy guys. I have 14 tubes of Crest toothpaste so that I always have toothpaste. And to this day, I have 3 teeth that have been pulled out of my body, and the rest are all my natural teeth. And I'm a senior man.
Thank the Navy for that.
I do.
Yeah.
And the other area, the medical areas, sure, I had some stomach problems, I had nervous problems, etc. And the medical attention on the USS New Jersey while we were out at sea, and even when we were in port, but especially while we were out at sea, they took care of their men, because we are a unit, and every man is a part of the machine, and every piece of the machine must run properly.
During lunchtime, while we were lining up getting our food back in the mess area, you mentioned that you had lobster served to you off the coast of Vietnam. What was the food like?
It was good. I never complained about the food. Of course, as a young man, we're always going to make comments, negative comments of this or negative comments of that. But when we were actually served the lobster, and I forget which days it was, but we were actually served the lobster, I said to the people who were with me, I says, look at this. We're being served lobsters, and those poor SOBs out there in the field are getting garbage. That made me feel a little bit bad, but then it also made me feel thankful that we were where we were at.
One of the things that were few issues we were talking about was the fact that when the ship was coming from the United States by Hawaii, that I've heard that somebody jumped off the ship.
That's a rumor that we heard. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was in the newspaper too. I don't know if it was Hawaii. I think it was more in tune to the island of Guam. I think that's where it was. And of course, there was scuttlebutt on the ship about the person being able to swim out to Guam. He didn't want to be on the ship anymore. But we did hear about someone who actually engaged in this, in jumping overboard.
That was probably something very unique, wouldn't it? That somebody would actually have that many problems that they would jump. Was that jumping off a ship? Was that done in the Navy? By the way, I've also heard that once that somebody was pushed off a ship on a destroyer.
Being pushed off a ship can happen. Well, I'll answer the first question. It's not very common to have somebody jump off a ship. It's a little bit of somebody has a problem if they're going to do that, especially if you're hundreds of miles out at sea, because jumping off of a ship is definitely a self-destructive act. As far as being pushed off of ships, I'm sure doing various types of interpersonal or personal conflicts that a person may have, that they might get into a fight or something like that, and somebody be pushed off a ship accidentally, or with all the years that the Navy has been around, even in the 20th century, I'm sure somebody was pushed off the ship soon or sometime, but it's not a common behavior.
Skipping back to the dangers of working on a ship like this, where you almost got crushed, a man named Andrew Tobias was crushed by a 16-inch shell when a buckle evidently broke or slipped. That was holding a chain as they're lowering a shell, and it crushed him against a hole. Do you recall that incident?
I recall somebody was injured. I didn't recall the name, nor did I know exactly what happened, but I do recall somebody was injured. I do recall the choppers coming in, taking somebody out. What was interesting, I met Andrew about maybe 7 years ago on the ship during an event. He and I were talking, and he asked if I remembered the incident where somebody was injured, and I said I knew that there was somebody who was injured. And he introduced himself as being the person who was injured.
But that's it. You don't recall anything else.
I do not recall any other details.
What were some common injuries that you heard about or saw on the ship? Because again, you work with heavy equipment, sharp edges, ladders you can fall down. What would happen to people on a ship like this?
For my hand, on these 3 hands here, 1, 2, 3, these 3 fingers, I was cut with a very sharp instrument across here, and I had no feeling in this unit right here. That's because I was walking along, and I grabbed a hold of something that was a very sharp piece of metal, and I didn't realize how sharp it was. I was holding my balance, and this and this finger took 18 stitches. And it was not a combat-related situation. It was just one of those things where it was an accident. I grabbed a hold of something I should not have grabbed a hold of to stabilize myself, and I got a cut right across there. 1, 2, 3, and the wedding ring. It was required to have the wedding ring cut off, and there was a number of stitches. What's interesting is I'm a right-hand person, and my responsibilities require that I use a lot of writing. Fortunately, it was to my left hand that it was done. It had no interference at all with my ability to perform my duties.
One other area I ask about sometimes is race relations on the ship. We had problems in the United States, 1968, 69, riots in cities and so on like that. What were the race relations like aboard the battleship New Jersey?
Personally, I had no problem with relationships as far as racial tension. We discussed it. A person named Harvey or Harry, I forget his name. He was an African American who was on the ship with us. He was a very good signalman. He and I would talk a lot. We'd go out to Liberty with each other. I remember when, I think it was not Martin Luther King Jr., but there was another person who was assassinated around that period of time.
Bobby Kennedy?
Bobby Kennedy, yes. I remember when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, we talked about Bobby Kennedy's assassination and the racial tension. I did not feel, if there was racial tension on the battleship at that period of time, I did not feel it.
You're now going to be heading back from your cruise from Vietnam. And instead of getting back home, what happens?
Morale is at its peak. We were as happy as new rooster in the hen house. We were going home. That was fantastic. There was this one person who had it was necessary to make the ship look real nice. There's one person, the gunner's mate, pulled turret number 2 all the way around to the port side. And he was working on the 3rd barrel of turret number 2. He was painting the end of the barrel. It looked really, really nice. It was right over top of the skipper's swimming pool, so he had the ladder on it. And it was a fantastic setup. It was really looking good. I have photographs of it. So we're doing our business, doing what we're supposed to do. I think it was sometime in early April of 1969. Then suddenly, coming over the 1MC, it was stated that there was a situation occurred, and that situation required that we respond to it immediately. So the ship immediately did 180 and approximately 27 knots at 170, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in that area. Actually, it might not have been 170. But anyway, we were going toward Japan to assist with a Korean incident that occurred. Now, I don't know if it was a plane, one of our planes, or if it was the USS Pueblo incident that we were responding to. I am not sure. But there was an incident. We were only a couple days out of Long Beach, and we turned around and we crossed the Pacific Ocean in a matter of a day and a half or 2 days. That ship is fast. The morale went from extremely high to down to almost 0. And this man who was working on the muzzle of number 3, turret 2 number 3, he just took the paint and just slammed it right down the side of the swimming pool. He was really annoyed. I'm not being very polite because I'm being recorded.
And what happened to this man? Obviously, if he's dumping paint on the deck and maybe on the teak deck, what happened to him?
He cleaned it up. From authorities higher than his division personnel. He cleaned it up.
So the morale of the entire crew then dropped when you got this?
Quite a number of them did, yes.
Did they have any problems on the ship where people were just angry, throwing food on the floor or something like that?
Oh, I think this was the only incident where I've seen any aggressive behavior. Other than that, it was just a morale problem. However, that was cured because when we did pull into Yokosuka, Japan, if I'm not mistaken, and when we pulled into Yokosuka, Japan, it gave us a little bit of time, a little bit of R&R, where we were able to get out there and enjoy ourselves and to be able to relax and get some of the tension relieved from it. It was really a worthwhile trip. However, even though we returned back, and it was a delay of a month or so before we went back, that trip back to Yokosuka, Japan, as I look back upon it sitting here now speaking to you, I'm glad we turned back. It gave us an opportunity to see Japan one more time. And unfortunately, in my life, that's the last time I've seen Japan.
That was 1968?
That was 1969.
69.
April of 1969.
I was in Japan March 1969, March at Yokosuka, going to cryptography school, a refresher cryptography school. If you know where the base at Yokosuka, they had some of these gigantic hangars built into a rock mountainside. And deep inside there is where the crypto school was held. And I was hung out in Yokosuka for a week or 2. School was 3 days. I got there for the last day and a half, and I stayed for another week till my money ran out. because I don't want to go back to Okinawa at the time.
It was beautiful.
Beautiful place.
I had the opportunity to see the great Buddha of Kamakura. I was in Tokyo, went to the Tokyo Olympic area. Items that I've seen that I would have
Now,
never
if
been
you're coming
exposed
back to
to.
the United States, what happens when you finally land? Is it in Long Beach?
It's in Long Beach.
What happens? What do you recall from that?
I can, I can pretty much recall everything. It was nice. It was exciting. Here is the world's most famous battleship coming up to the piers, and you can see all the ships in front of us. All of the people who are either A, glad to see us, or B, they're war protesters and trying to stop us. Who's going to, a sailboat trying to stop a battleship, especially when it's only about 20 feet long? It's not going to happen. So we came into port. There was a couple of resistors, but mostly it was the family. And I kept looking, and I kept looking, and finally I saw the one person who I was looking for the most. And it was a great, great experience.
That was your wife then?
That was my prior spouse. That's right. And it was a very, very nice homecoming, not just for myself, but for everybody. It was a beautiful, beautiful time in our life.
Now, what happens? We find out that the battleship New Jersey will not go back to Vietnam again, and that it will be decommissioned. Do you recall that?
I recall the time.
You do. What went through your mind, and what went through the mind of or other crew members on the ship that you can recall?
At the period of time when the battleships, when the press announced the battleship was going to be decommissioned, at that period of time I was separated from the service, and it was probably September of 1969, somewhere in that area, September. After I was separated from the service, August 10th, 1969, my spouse and I spent some time in Long Beach. We were honeymooning in Long Beach, and then we flew home. When we flew home, I couldn't get myself out of Vietnam. Even though now I was home, I wanted to be back there again. I wanted to see what was happening. I wanted to see what the world was doing with it. I paid attention to the news of the USS New Jersey. Very few contacts with anybody from New Jersey. I was in contact with a person named Robert Ayton, who lives in Manasquan, New Jersey. I was in contact with Richard Phone, who lives in Runnymede, New Jersey. These two people I've met after I was out of the service. I watched, and then suddenly, sometime in September, it was announced that the battleship was going to be decommissioned. It was a part of my life, a part of the history of the United States, that I felt was going to be a real loss toward our nation. And maybe it was because there was a greed inside of me. I really did not want to see that battleship be decommissioned. Although I knew it was being decommissioned, it was not being disassembled. So I felt grief. I felt bad about that they were taking it apart.
Did your friends feel the same way too?
I did not ask them about that. I just said, well, they're taking the ship out. I said, yeah, I see it. That was about it.
Now that the ship is back in service again as a museum ship, when did you first come aboard, and what was your reaction when you first came back to the ship?
It was like coming home. It was like seeing someone it was like seeing a family member who you have not seen for 30 years, yet is a fiber of your life. When the USS New Jersey was coming up the river on Veterans Day of 1999, if I'm not mistaken, that's when it was coming up, I always told my children how big the ship was, what it looked like, and how beautiful it was. And my oldest boy, when he first saw the ship coming up the river, and then when the ship began to turn, all he said to me was, wow, you weren't kidding. It was a good homecoming feeling.
How does it feel to be aboard it now, that you could actually board the ship?
Nice.
Final question then. I always ask people, what impact did your time aboard the battleship New Jersey have on your life?
Profound. It had a profound positive effect on my life. The battleship New Jersey is a component of my life. It is a environment that my life doesn't evolve around with, doesn't coexist with, it interfaces, it intertwines with my life. That doesn't mean I think of the Battleship New Jersey every day, but the lessons I've learned from the battleship have taken me through life, enabled me to give the courage to have the fortitude to be able to conquer things, life's challenges that normally I may not have been able to endure if I was not exposed to the life on this ship and on the USS Sarsfield.